And speaking of a global brand and a global situation, EVs is a definite global situation, electric vehicles. And I've got the breakdown on all these headlines around Tesla and energy. So we're going to do a fast case study on EVs, what happened in California, and what happened on energy. It's all tied together. I'm going to go run over Studio B and find my board. All right, I found Studio B and my famous board. So this past week, there have been a bunch of headlines about Tesla and about, oh, Elon Musk is going to be taken over, by all these manufacturers that are going to go after him with their own cars. There's some very beautiful cars coming on the market right now from BMW, Mercedes, and others. But let's look behind the story that is Tesla, and find out what's really going on. Because I think some of those headlines are being driven by a lot of the media that likes to pick on Elon Musk. And of course, they've been upset about Twitter and X, so they pick on him. But let's look and see what's really going on. So what's behind the headlines this week? Well, the first thing that's going on is let's step back and look at market share and new vehicle sales. So put some numbers behind it. Because as a Biz Doc likes to say, words talk, numbers scream. So let's see what the numbers are screaming. Let's look at this little chart here. This is EV sales in the second quarter of this year. So that's April, May, June of 2023. And we're sitting here in September of 23 as we have all this data pulled together. This is how much did that change year over year? And then what is the share of EVs of total new cars? So let's just take the top one. China. They make all kinds of small, very economically priced EVs. They sold 1.2 million of them, which is up 20% year over year, and it's now 17% of their car market. Very interesting. Then you come to the United States. We're running at a clip of about 1.2 million cars per year, 285,000 in second quarter, 48% up year over year, and 7% of new cars. I'm going to tell you why 5% is a big threshold, and the US being at 7% is significant. And then you go take a look down here, and there's California. A lot of times people make that, not a joke, but they make a comment. They said, if California was its own country, it would be the 6th largest economy in the world. Well, there you have it. 1, 2, 3, 4 in EV sales. So 109,000 of those 285, like 40% of them came from California, which is up 70% year over year. And EVs is now almost a quarter, 22%. So it's 1/5 heading to 1/4 of total cars sold. Right now, where they plug those in and get them charged, except overnight in their garage, is another question, but we'll get to that in a minute. So nonetheless, you can see what's going on here. And what I find is really interesting is things like Norway. Check that out. 82% of new cars in Norway are EVs, and right next door, Sweden, 39%. So as you can see in those Nordic countries, they're already well down the EV path, but you got to plug them in. So the first thing to look at here is how California, with all the things it's been saying, no diesel trucks by 2025, no new trucks sold will be diesels, got to phase them out, blah, 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 blah. They're going to put a big tax on diesel, supposedly 2026. All these things that are coming out, and they're driving toward this. So first thing we look at EV sales. Okay, Tom, that's how they're doing around the world. What does this mean for Tesla? Thank you for asking. So now, the first thing we look at is what happens when EVs hit 5% of market share. It's like when you have friends where now 10%, 15% of your friends were using Instagram. Literally 6 months later, everyone was using it. That's called the seed and lag effect. The market gets seeded, and when it hits a certain percent of everybody's doing it, then boom, everybody is doing it. So in this case, take a look here. This shows the number of years after 5% market share is hit for EVs. So California is the blue line, the US is the red. So 1, 2, 3, 4, almost 5 years, California is at 20, almost 25% of EVs. See that? And look how the US is following. The red line is following it. We've hit 5% as a nation. Actually, it's around 7. And so within 4 years from now, it's going to be 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 cars sold brand new in America are EVs. Ladies and gentlemen, we're there. Over the next president, when the next president walks out of office or is rolled out of office in a box, if it's Joe Biden at 88 years old and he finally kicks the bucket, you will have basically a nation where 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5 cars is electric. Okay, well, that's great. So that means we're on the cusp of growth. What is going to drive that growth? A lot of manufacturers making cars. And let's take a look at this. Let's look at the EV market share in California. Now, there's going to be a lot going on in this chart, but stay with me. Do you see this black line? This is Tesla's market share. And here we go, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, where we are today. Tesla, despite headlines, despite people being upset with him, despite the mainstream media, just passed Toyota. Remember, the Teslas are more expensive. Toyota has a lot of smaller vehicles that are EVs and hybrids before that. Tesla just dethroned Toyota in California. Look at this. Second quarter just completed. Let's look at it right here. We can just see this end right here. Tesla 6% of everything sold in California. Toyota 14.2. And then Honda. As you can see, Honda's actually sloped down. So is the red line here with this Nissan. So the two Japanese makers, they make a lot in the United States, have factories in the United States, they have slid. And so what else is growing besides, there's been a little pop-up here for Honda, but they're down from where they were. You see where it goes? And everybody else is floating along down here, and Mercedes and BMW making ones are very expensive, and they're living down here at 4%. But look at this, everybody's sharing this, and Ford and Chevy, started out, they're the blue lines. Look, they started out here, particularly Ford, and now they've ticked down. But there's your answer as to how's Tesla really doing. The answer is they're doing just fine, and they introduced, another model, 4 years ago that was the, which model was that? That's the SUV with the gull wing doors, Model Y, I think it was. Anyway, they've passed, but that's not the story. They're selling the cars, and they're actually #1 in California. And everybody picking on Tesla, I bet there's a certain governor not very happy that in the midst of all this, oh, he's going to be distracted running 2 companies. Yeah, well, Tesla's not distracted. He's at 6% market share and rising. So let's go take a look at the charging network, because all those cars that get sold, they got to get plugged in. And if you're going on a trip somewhere, that's when it's really tough to plug in, because you want to find what's called a fast charger. Anybody you know that has an EV wants to find a fast charger, because in about 20 minutes you can get about 70% charge, but it's got to be the fast high wattage charger, like the Tesla supercharger stations you see with those really cool, kind of looks like meant to look like a gas pump, but it's got this extension cord in there and you plug right in. So market power. What is happening with market power? Well, the first thing is everyone in the last 6 weeks, there have been 3 major agreements with car makers around the world, and 70% of them have agreed to the Tesla plug standard. And I think it's called the 1772 plug. Never mind what it's called, it's going to be the outlet. Let me kind of help you with this. It would be like all cell phones agreeing to use the same chargers, so you don't have to say, yeah, do you have the old iPhone, the new iPhone, or do you have that little mini USB you use for Android? We do this all the time. Well, that's what's happening in cars. But now there's these major agreements have come, they're all going to use the same plug. So, okay, so Tesla's, now why is that important? Here's why it's important. Tesla's supercharger footprint is expanding. They just made a deal with Hilton to install another 20,000 plugs at 2,000 hotels. This is big. I'll tell you why it's big. Because the manufacturers are making deals. Manufacturers need somewhere to plug these in, and I'm going to tell you the headline you're going to see in a minute. Tesla has 51% of the plug outlets in North America. 51%. So if you sell an electric vehicle and it doesn't work with an adapter or to plug in at Tesla, they can't recharge there. Guess what is just happening now, folks? They're all going to be on the Tesla charger standard, which means if you go to a Tesla supercharger, you could plug it in. If the people that made your car have a deal with Tesla that you could use the plug. Whoa, wait a minute, look what just happened. In May, Ford CEO Jim Farley announced Tesla charging deal. In June, Rivian, who's a newcomer that makes electric trucks, announced a deal. July, GM CEO Mary Barra announced a deal, and a year ago she announced that Cadillac will be all electric within 3 years. July, Mercedes, Nissan, and Hyundai announced deals with Tesla. Why? Because they have to. Because if you're selling an EV, you got to get it charged somewhere other than your home. And everyone will buy the small charger at home. Then Piper Sandler, which is ironically, an analyst. They said, we've done an analysis of this, and we think that Tesla is going to earn $3 billion in charging by 2030 just on the deals they did with Ford and GM. Well, if Tesla's making the $3 billion on that, who's not making it? Everybody else. They're just making cars. So guess what? Tesla is #1 market share of cars in California, and Tesla is #1 market share of places to plug your car in after you leave home. Isn't that amazing? So everybody likes to talk about Tesla. Let's look at this. This is from the U.S. Department of Energy. You can get an app and you can go to a website to constantly see where you can plug in. These are fast chargers. These are the ones you need when you're traveling. Because when you're traveling, you're not going to sit there for 2 hours. Now, if you stop at a Hilton Garden Inn and you plug on overnight for a full charge, sure, that's great. Cars still are around 300 miles right now. Well, 300 miles, if you're taking a long trip of 500 miles from San Francisco to Los Angeles, you know, it's about 350 miles. Want to go all the way to Sacramento? That's going to take a full charge in the middle somewhere. Where do you do it? Well, these fast chargers usually will give, the rule of thumb is 70% in 20 to 25 minutes. But it has to be the fast charger. So Tesla has 17,000 fast charger ports in the United States. According to the Department of Energy, there are 8,000 locations with 33,000 ports, which means Tesla has 51% of the fast charging ports. And one port is one extension cord sitting at a place for you to plug in. Isn't that interesting? So why did those car dealers, all those car manufacturers make the deal with Tesla? Because they had to. So there you go. And if you're buying a car like that, that's good for you, because you really don't care. You just want to go get electric gas when you need it. Now then, the empire strikes back. Bum, bum, bum. July 26, GM, BMW, Honda, Hyundai, Mercedes, Kia, and Stellantis announce we're building our own Death Star charging network. We're going to put 30,000 plugs in urban and travel corridors. Urban means city, travel corridors, that's a highway going between cities. Then, but we're not going to disclose exactly how many charging stations or how this joint venture is exactly going to work. And well, some of them will be ready next summer, but we don't know exactly how many. And no, we don't have any estimates on how long it's going to take to build the network. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is real. But this is also a defensive announcement to the stock markets to tell them that they don't intend to allow Tesla to own the majority of those charging stations. Ladies and gentlemen, the charging stations are going to be operated either by Tesla, who's been renting space. If you've ever drawn on major highways, you'll see a supercharger station, maybe there at here in Florida, we have toll roads. Florida Turnpike runs from almost Miami to Orlando. And so you can go on there, and there's a couple charging stations that are located with these big rest areas. There's like 3 restaurants, 3 service stations, and a Tesla superchargers off to one side, a whole bunch of them. And so these folks are saying, hey, we're not giving the world to Tesla. We got a joint venture to do it. Well, let me tell you, if it's a joint venture, then no one of you is going to earn the money on it. And you're making 30,000 plugs separated out. And they're not talking about a key fact I'll bring up in a minute. Nonetheless, defensive announcement. You see what I mean? Now then, so now what's the story behind the story? Headlines love to pick on Musk and Tesla. Twitter X feelings is showing up in the coverage. That's why you don't hear this. So let's put it this way. If Elon Musk was Joe Biden's son, the headlines would be talking about all the good stuff that Tesla has done with charging stations everywhere and all these cars. No. They're picking on him. They pick on him. And the feelings about Twitter and X come right through the mainstream media into coverage for Tesla. Because we're talking dominance here. And easy to pick on him because the Cybertruck is late. It is. And the old models haven't been refreshed. Some of the style looks a little dated, a little bit, when you start comparing them to especially BMW and Mercedes with what they're bringing out. And, when autopilot, fails, that makes for great drama when it runs a red light and causes an accident or something in the early stages of a full autopilot, or full autonomous driving. So there's more than enough for them to pick on. But what's the truth? They're missing the point. Tesla passes everyone, now number one in California. They control 60% of the US EV market. They have the highest margin in the industry because they didn't have to rebuild factories. They don't have to retrofit. It's called retrofitting. You don't have to retrofit anything. And lastly, they have 40,000 chargers at hotels. That's 40,000 total. We already know they got 17,000 fast chargers and 20,000 coming from Hilton. So they're going to be building 20,000 really fast to go with their 40, which will give them 60 before those car manufacturers make 30, which will then be, they've got half and Tesla's got 2/3. So there you go. Tesla controls 60% of the market. That is the story behind the story. The story is one of market dominance. But now what's next? Something is very interesting. A guy I know, Peter Madden, he would know the answer to this and he would remember this. Once upon a time, GM had 45% of the car market, right around 1970, 75. And Exxon, wasn't called Exxon quite yet, but was the number 2 most valuable corporation in America. Gas stations, petroleum refinery. That's where Tesla is now. Tesla's got this huge chunk of the car market and they have this huge chunk of the service station. It's both. It would be like going back to 1970 and GM at 45% share also owns Standard Oil of Ohio and what becomes this huge network of gas stations. Well, that didn't happen back then. The trust busters, originally dating back to Teddy Roosevelt, but they still had their grandchildren in the US Congress, wouldn't have let that happen. But nonetheless, that's where it is today. Second point, what's next? In under 5 years, EVs are going to be 25, maybe up to 33%. I think it's going faster than the trend line and will be about 33% of US sales. And manufacturers are not trying to be Tesla. They did a joint venture so that someone could, dear God, someone please build more charging stations, but they're competing on what they've always done. Price, product differentiation, features, new technology, all that. And for everybody picking on Tesla and full self-driving, right? Go take a look at CEO Jim Farley, holding a coffee and driving on the highway, bragging about, what's it called, Ford Blue or whatever it's called. It's their self-driving. Everybody's trying to do it. So even the people that are whispering to the media, trying to undermine Tesla's story, they're building the same thing, but they're competing on product. And finally, this isn't a true threat. And punchline, no one's talking about $7.5 billion coming from the US government to help build those things in the JV. So this is also your government actually doing something to help you and me if we have an EV by partnering with people to get more charging stations built. And you don't want to just give the money to Elon Musk and give him 80% market share, because actually I think that wouldn't be the right idea. And finally, the greater threat is coming from power companies, because Tesla also makes a thing called the Powerwall, and they also make solar shingles that go on top of your house. It doesn't look like solar panels, it looks like a regular roof. And power companies are now messing with net metering. Here's what net metering is real quick. You put solar roof on, and during the day you're at work, and you have your air conditioning turned to 80, and no one is at your house. You are going to be making more energy than just the basic electric appliances and your air conditioning in your house. More energy. Where does that go if you don't have a battery to store it at home? Because you've seen these big battery walls that go in your garage. It goes back to the power company. It's called net metering. So in exchange for you sending power into the system, They pay you something for the power and they deduct it from your bill. You use $300, you created $100, so your bill is $200. And it's a way through net metering. Power companies right now do not like it because you own the solar, the sun is free, and you made that energy and you are actually paying them less. So the power companies are messing with the net metering costs. So for the solar and the battery technology that Tesla's doing, I think Tesla faces a greater threat coming from power companies that don't want their revenue to be less next year than this year. And they don't want, they'll say, oh, we want all of the above, solar, wind, hydro, next generation nuclear, everything. Wrong. They don't want anything that you would own, like solar roofs, pumping it back in. Ultimately, they want to build their own wind farms and their own clean energy things, because the last thing they want to do is reduce their revenue because you got money from the government to put a solar roof on and you're paying half of your bill by net metering it right back to the power company. I think that's a greater threat for Tesla on its power strategy. But at the end of the day, operating the supercharger stations, Tesla just gets energy right off the grid. So that's what's going on. The deeper story is Tesla's fine. And despite a distracted CEO that's trying to change, morph, and take Twitter into the future as X, you will find that the energy side, they're a market share leader and they're crunching it out. And if it wasn't for the fact that mainstream media's got a little thing going on with Elon Musk, all of this would be headlines talking about how Microsoft is dominating software or Amazon is dominating this, but they don't talk about that because he's such a lightning rod for controversy. And that, my friends, is what is going on with all this controversy and all these headlines about Tesla and energy. They're making more deals with car makers because they have to work with Tesla and the subhead everybody wants to hide from. If you want more on this, in the past, I did 2 case studies on Tesla. One of them, I called it out. And I said, look right here, no longer just a car company, it was an energy company. And then I talked about the hype behind what they were doing. So there's 2 case studies there. We're going to put the links to them in the description so you can go look at those too. I think it's a fascinating story, especially if you go back and look at those 2 in order and then rewatch this one. It gives you a deeper look into what I think is one of the defining, leaders of our era, and that has driven America to electric cars and deserves more than a little bit of credit for doing so because it's a part of our clean energy future. That's it. Let me go back to main studio and we'll wrap it up for this week. Thanks for watching it.